This process that's known as CPR, which stands for Context, Purposes, and Results, I believe that by definition it'll solve this issue of unity that Paul Cienfuegos has suggested that we need to engage in a series of meetings where we just get to know each other and get to trust each other, and which is all good, but I think we can fast forward that simply by reaching an agreement on our intentions. And the beauty of this process is there's nothing to say what those intentions can be or not be. For example, we can agree that those intentions include putting our egos aside, that we work for the betterment of the community, that our political affiliations are not going to dominate in any level, our philosophies will not dominate, but we agree on the specific intentions of what we're going to pursue. So I think that I just want to give you an introduction to that CPR process that is profound, because what it does is it results in a context. There she is. We said we needed a woman, and you showed up.
I'm a little intimidated by all you guys.
That's why.
With your power, we're under.
Lisa, sit at the head of the table.
No, I don't want to be near the computer. Thank you.
Come on in.
Let's talk
Sorry,
of more
I'm
women
late.
next week, Lisa.
Huh?
More women
Yeah.
next week, perhaps.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for doing this, Ed.
Well, I don't know if I'm not going to be able to do it justice today because I got to be back at the office at 1:30. I've got a deposition that I just found out I have to handle.
Okay, continue.
So I was just saying, by definition, this process that we call CPR, which stands for Context, Purposes, and Results, one done correctly, it naturally leads to a context. And the context is a feeling level. And you'll know it when you get it. And that feeling level is what Paul is wanting us to arrive at. So I believe that he thinks takes weeks to arrive at. I think we can do it just by coming to an agreement on the intentions that we're going to agree to. So that's my initial introduction. Is that looks great.
Good. Yes, that's me.
Is that all right?
Lisa?
Yeah.
Since you're talking, I'll just eat it.
That's the Indian masala. That looks good, doesn't it? Ayurvedic with ghee and everything. Mm-hmm. So I want to read this. Is Heiner coming? He's late. I did a draft of a Declaration of Independence for Jefferson County, Iowa.
Yay!
And it's not even close to being correct or done, but it just gives you a flavor. It's basically a takeoff on the original Declaration of Independence. But let me just read it and then comment whatever you want. We, the people of Jefferson County, Iowa, hold these truths to be self-evident: that we are all created equal, that we are endowed by our Creator with a divine birthright. This birthright includes the gift of inalienable rights. These inalienable rights necessarily include the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These rights also necessarily include the right to self-government. It is not only our right, but our duty to ensure that any form of government that exists over us gives respect to our God-given rights, including life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and self-government. When it becomes apparent to us that existing forms of government at any level fail to protect our God-given rights, our duty to alter the forms of government over us becomes evident. Our right of self-government necessarily includes the right to alter or abolish the forms of government that we feel violate our most basic rights. Unless we recognize and act upon our duty of self-government, we give our implied consent to those forms of government we oppose. We therefore formally declare our right and duty to institute new forms of government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its power in such form as it seems most likely to affect our safety and happiness. We, the people of Jefferson County, Iowa, do therefore affirm our sacred right and duty to assume responsibility for our self-government. We together affirm and pledge our sacred honor to the principles of self-government. This pledge includes accepting personal responsibility for the forms of government we create. Together we pledge to devote ourselves to the creation of a community that we are proud of and the legacy we leave behind. That was my first shot at a Declaration of Independence for Jefferson County, Iowa.
Great idea.
It's what I like about it is it doesn't, the Declaration of Independence obviously was magnificent in what it said, but I think in today's world we don't take responsibility for the principles that were embedded within that declaration.
Yep.
And that's why I think it's important at the community level to reaffirm that those principles apply to us. And that not and don't take the assumption that somebody else is going to protect those principles. And it was clear if you read the Declaration that the reason why it arose was because they recognized that their rights were being trampled upon. So anyway, that's my first shot at it.
Cool.
Thank you.
So I'm
Does
going
that
to
fit
eat.
into the CPR thing, or is that just a
It fits into what I hope that we accept as an intended result, and that is that we accept that we have responsibility of self-government, and that this council, or whatever we call ourselves, takes those responsibilities seriously, and that we're devoted to the process of creating forms of self-government that serve our community.
It would seem to a lot of that process is going to, by necessity, from what you said before, involve educating the larger community.
Yeah, no question about it.
Just a side note.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a massive educational component to this. But I will tell you this, one thing I've learned, if you want to change society, you don't have to worry about changing the followers. The followers will always be the followers. You change the leaders. If you change the leaders, then the followers will follow the new leaders. And what this is all about is about creating a new generation of leaders, new generation of leadership at the local level. That's what I am interested in through this process. And getting the leaders of our community involved, the best and the brightest of our community involved in creating new forms of government using the knowledge that's out there that is not being instituted in a spirit of self-government where we accept responsibility for instituting those forms and not assume that it's being handled, because it's not being handled. Let's be honest. Our rights are being violated all over, everywhere they're being violated. So that's what I'm interested in.
And the actual question,
Can I see that?
the leaders would then pick up a lot of the educational component just by default. Well, not by default, but part and parcel of their being leaders. If the followers are going to follow the leaders,
They will.
yeah, that's fine.
And that was
I think that's true.
the founders' ideal model, was a form of representative government. But we do it, but we do it in a way that doesn't work. If you understand that everything in life is governed by the bell curve, you start with that analysis. Let's just talk about education modalities, okay? The way the bell curve is structured, and for some reason this is a law of nature, okay? That's what the bell curve represents, is a law of nature. Down at this level of the bell curve, there's those forms of education that are the least effective. At this end of the bell curve are those forms of education that are most effective. By definition, in the middle are those forms of education that are mediumly effective. That's just the way it is. All that already exists. Our form of government, the problem with our form of government is we don't have a form of government that results in the most effective forms of education being adopted. We don't have that form of government. We make the assumption that our elected leaders are they're fully up to date, they know exactly what's going on, that they're doing all the research, and it simply isn't occurring. They got day jobs. Nobody's doing it.
Well, even if it was occurring, it's a question of whether they'd be interested in it.
It's true as well, because much of government serves the self-interest of either the people that are elected or the people that they're associated with.
or beholden to.
Exactly.
Look at Grassley right now. He's home on recess, and he always holds a lot of public meetings when he comes to Iowa in recess. He's holding none.
Oh,
Because
really?
he doesn't want to be questioned.
About the
No, really.
about probably the
It's a Supreme Court
constitutional
thing.
judge and
Wow.
a bunch of them. Wow, that sucks.
That's a first for him. Usually he does these meetings around this area. He always go to Batavia, where the Fairfield people aren't so cognizant.
Does he?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that way he can tell he's covered this area. He can say he's covered this area, but he hasn't really covered this town.
So what specifically are you thinking that he doesn't want to be questioned about?
Probably the constitutional
Other-
judge.
Oh, he's the head of
Supreme
the
Court.
Judiciary Committee.
Oh, he is, okay.
Yeah,
Right.
And he's
he's adamant.
on record for decades, lots of quotes from him saying how it's crucial that the Congress hold hearings on Supreme Court nominees, and it's our constitutional responsibility, and on and on and on. And now, of course, he's found logic and rationale in his mind, and all his fellow Republicans, for why they shouldn't hold, because it's Obama's last year. So he doesn't get to nominate. The people should decide. But he doesn't want to be questioned on it. That's the point. He won't defend his position because he's a coward. He knows what he's doing is BS. Just like when he talked about the death penalty.
How did you hear he's holding no meetings?
I read it in the last few days.
Did you know that Biden said the same thing at the end of Bush's term?
I heard that, yeah. See, the deal is when the founders, when they originally created the model, they had the understanding, the reason why they created a system of federalism and they limited the powers of the federal government specifically, was they wanted to have at least 50 different experiments going on in terms of how people govern themselves. That's the system. It's called federalism. That's why we had the 9th and 10th Amendment, was to prevent the federal government from dominating and creating one system for all the states. But they also thought, and it wasn't, the bottom line is they really didn't have time to talk about the relationship between the states and the communities or the counties, what that relationship was like. In reality, the perfect society would be so decentralized that every community in America would have sovereignty, or they would take responsibility for their self-government, and they would create whatever they wanted to create, basically. Now, what's going to happen? I can tell you what's going to happen. The bell curve is going to happen, because it always happens. That's how it works. But the good news is, instead of having 50 experiments, you're going to have, 100,000 experiments going on? Well, all I'm saying is, some community in America needs to take responsibility for their self-government. Mm-hmm. And many communities have to some degree, and they've had successes, and that's really the truth of it. So if one community, and I'm suggesting it in Jefferson County, Iowa, makes this declaration of independence and responsibility, which by definition independence implies responsibility, and we create these citizen task force models, we can then find out what the very best practices are in every area of society, and then we at least have the chance of adopting them here locally. And I believe that our community, in the light of day, if we bring light, Marcy said if you bring light, the darkness goes automatically. All we're doing is bringing light into different forms of government. So if one community does it, then what happens?
It spreads.
There's an example.
It gets attacked. Well, actually,
Not necessarily. Because, doesn't everybody want their children to have the very best education? Doesn't everybody want to have the best water, the best food? Doesn't everybody want all of those things?
Yeah, but that's your rational mind speaking, and people don't behave from that, as the Trump phenomenon shows.
Well,
We don't need, see, now you're getting into
No.
partisan politics.
No,
This is
I'm
not about
I'm
partisan
talking
politics.
about how the human mind works. What I heard from you was a rational statement that I would agree with personally, but there's a lot of people who, like if you go out into rural, hear me out, if you go to rural Jefferson County and talk to them about CAFOs, for instance, their rational mind is not going to speak, even if their health is being damaged by the CAFO. You have to understand. It depends how you talk to them also.
It depends on your credibility and
so I agree with your principle, but the thing is that, the point that Bruce brought up and that Fred further supported is that not only do we have to have ideas that work, but we've got to be able to express those in a way like a marketing department.
right. I agree.
Speaking of which, we're on protocol, or what we're here for today. That's a great introduction. May I say, was there another type of content you were going to introduce to us?
Yeah, we were going
A
to.
meeting style. You want to shift to that?
Well, no. What this is about was helping us to get clarity on our intended results. It's not really a meeting style, although you could say it has meeting style implications. It's basically this process called CPR, where we agree on the intended results that we want to have occur. Okay? This is an amazing process, and we're just going to have to do it. Otherwise, we can talk about it forever, but if we just simply do it, what will happen is we'll start to have a feeling of a context. A new context is being created. It's a feeling level. It's in the heart. And the beauty of this process is once you complete the process and you arrive at the context, then all you have to do is, quote, hold the context, and the intended results happen by magic without having to control the agenda. And that's why it's nonpartisan. It's not about, well, I think we need to focus on CAFOs, or I think we need, those are agenda items, okay? What we really want to do, if we're super smart, is arrive at a context that allows those things to happen automatically. And that context would necessarily include this issue of the way that we communicate with people, and we're seen as non-threatening, and all of that.
So is there no place for agenda items?
After you've completed, the biggest mistake people make, and that they try to lead something, is they start with agenda. Have you ever gone to a meeting and you're sitting there and the guy's going off, and he says, oh, that's just his agenda. And you don't want anything to do with it. So the real leaders come from context. Martin Luther King, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, Gandhi. They had this context that was so beautiful and all-inclusive. They were real leaders. Because they were leaders of who they were and where they came from, Jesus. These are the real leaders. These are not agenda items. This is not my idea of how it should go. But they're serving this higher purpose, this higher context. And so what I want to do is I want to introduce this process and then work together to arrive and to get clarity on all the intended results that we want, that we all agree on, okay? And it's important that we agree on everything in terms of the intended results. Not the agenda, but the intentions of what we're doing.
Well, I came here because you said you were going to lead us through the process, and I am anxious to learn.
Okay? So I don't know if we're going to get through it because of our time constraints.
Would it be good to start?
Yeah. Now this is where I was hoping that Bruce we would need somebody to write stuff down.
Well, I can take notes off of this. It's being recorded.
Okay, if you're willing to do that, it's not a problem. So, this is a process where we're going to open ourselves up, and in the spirit of serving our higher purpose, we're going to, and we don't have to worry about whether we actually agree at this time on everything, because we're going to go back and we're going to refine it, and we're going to get to the point where we do agree on all the intended results. But the key now is to just start talking and listing and making a list of what we want, where our intended results are, what our intentions are, if we're going to engage and agree and be a part of this, what we're doing.
So this is not specifics, because that would be the agenda.
That's right.
So it's more the feeling level,
That's right. That's right.
the happiness value,
Yeah.
the health, all
Yeah.
that.
There's a wholeness to it. So how about, I'll just start off. How about one of our intentions is that we unite the community.
Beautiful.
Okay. I guess we're not going to write these down.
We're not?
Well, he's going to
Me
do it.
again?
He's going to do it.
Okay.
Well, if we're going to refine them, we need to have a list. Somebody needs to make a list.
Yeah, he'll
Yeah, but he already said he's going to do it.
But
So.
that's later.
Wait, but
Okay,
yeah.
somebody is.
Yeah, but we're not
Jack,
gonna-
I'll write
We're
it.
not going to get these all done, but if she'll write it, that's great. The community is united. That we are perceived as agents of purity.
We is who's we?
We, you and I.
I mean this group?
Yeah, everything we do is we're perceived as servants of higher purpose. It's important that we're seen that way. We're not. You get my point? We want to be perceived that way. We don't want to be perceived as, oh, that's just somebody with an agenda.
Does that imply a religious connotation?
No, not necessarily.
Would it to the public,
This is our context, okay?
right?
This is our context.
Okay.
It's not
Oh,
something
okay,
that's
gotcha.
made public.
In other words, we dedicate ourselves to
To
purity
pure-
in our deep.
But we want,
I'm
one
with
of our intended results is that we are perceived by the community as serving true higher purpose. Okay?
Yeah, and
That's a proposed intended result.
on the religious question, Martin Luther King, most people would have seen him as serving a higher purpose, although some would disagree. But they didn't necessarily make that religious, even though he was a reverend. That was sort of a secondary factor.
And I think in the Declaration of Independence, he said it very well. It's
There's
those abstract principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
and the value of that, I think, of that perception in the public eye is that that implies a nonpartisan element.
Right. How about we are truly nonpartisan?
Yeah.
And to already we have the idea, the possibility of, like, if we try to be perceived as coming from a purity or higher power type thing, then you have an opening for the religious folks of the town to start to argue about that. But when you couch it in terms of the principles of the Declaration of Independence, in that kind of language, then everybody kind of intuitively understands, oh, I get it. This is about nationhood purity, political type of purity and all that, and
Okay,
not a Jesus or Muhammad or type of thing purity.
All right, let me make a point of order here. At this point, it's not about how it's going to happen. It's not about how these things are going to happen. The beauty of this process is, once we set our intentions, we let go. It's the opposite of control. It's the opposite of agenda. Okay? So our job is simply to set the intentions. This is straight out of the Bhagavad Gita, by the way. When Krishna informed Arjuna, it was to be without the three gunas. It was also about engaging in action without attachment to the results. Right? Without attachment. So it wasn't about not taking action, and it was also the actions was extremely specific that Arjuna took. And I call the intentions, they're like arrows. We're letting the arrows go, and then we let go. And so the why this process is so magical is that you engage the forces of nature. The job of a human being is to set intentions in their life. And all we're doing is we're doing it collectively. And that gives it greater power, much greater power. So I'm just making a point of order. All we're doing now is setting our intentions. We're not talking about how that's going to happen or how it's going to be done or anything like that. Okay?
So I have a couple
All right.
things.
Come on in, Art.
One is
Right here, Iron.
the principle of love and the other is the principle of expansion of happiness.
Right.
Jesus talked about love. Maharishi said that the purpose of life is the expansion of happiness. And to me, those two are inextricably linked. And if we can, through whatever specific actions we take, be about spreading those principles in our community, we'll have a strong foundation.
And along with that, uniting what you just said, along with uniting the community, is that everyone is created equal.
How about this? We further love in the community. That's one way of saying it. We further love in the community.
Okay.
We want to break these down so that they're very concrete, specific intentions. And if you want to do more than further, that we stay in love. We stay in love. You can say that as well. And then with regard to happiness, is that we promote happiness.
Yeah.
We promote happiness. And our actions result in happiness in the community. That could be a nice intended result. What'd you do,
Staying
Ruff?
in love sounds too mushy to me for most people.
These are our intentions.
Internal.
These are not community.
Oh, okay.
This is how we're setting our intentions,
Okay.
so that we can arrive at our intent, our context.
Okay.
Okay.
Then it's fine.
You missed part of the original.
Sorry.
So, how about that? Our actions result in significantly improved practices in the community. That's one way of saying it.
Say that again.
Our actions result in significantly improved collective action in the community.
Since I was late, have you gone over Fred's paper? Because he has a lot of this in there. Intentions.
When did that come out?
You passed it out this,
Let me see. Okay. So there's nothing wrong with these. Many of them are bordering on agenda items, but there's ways of, for example, the first one, economic and cultural security. How about that our actions promote economic prosperity in the community? I think we could agree on that.
I think security is good along with prosperity.
I agree.
Some
So that's a
people-
separate intention.
Yeah.
We promote security in the community. And I don't even know what you mean by security, so I don't know what you mean by that.
Yeah, that's-
Improved also
a
as a
loaded word.
questionable.
I have a point of order question here. We seem to be discussing, what our intended goals are for the community.
That's right.
I was under the impression that we were going to talk about our intended goals for the group, which is a different discussion. And that's the one I thought we were going to have, because as I expressed in emails, it looked to me like we have maybe generally similar goals, but not totally similar. And like you started out the meeting with a very clear statement for the first 10 minutes or so of what your agenda is. And very clear. And, it's very good for us to understand what you're really interested in, because that's what you told us, what you're really interested in. But, we could agree on goals for the community, but, there's a community rights group that's pursuing what it considers good goals for the community. There are political groups, there are cultural groups. So there are different ways that could manifest, but this particular group of people right here, who took the time and energy to come, what are we going to do? And I would be more interested in discussing what the goals of our group are.
I have a suggestion. Are you done, Fred?
Well, I mean, that's my essential point, but I'd like to hear people respond to that.
That's what I have.
Okay.
Here's what seems really clear to me. What are our goals as a group that are not our goals for the community? That differentiates it. Are there any goals for our group in terms of our internal functioning? The first goal would be, perhaps, achieve our goals for the community. Then we list those in some other discussion. But what are our goals, other than achieving our goals for the community, what are our goals for the group? And then we stay away from anything in that discussion that are goals for the community.
So you understand the process. I believe that anything that you have as a goal that you believe should be the goal of this group, we can serve in this process that I'm discussing. I don't think there's any goal that you have that we cannot serve. Okay? But it's not about the goal. It's again,
It's about
the problem that people have, the reason why this process gets messed up is because people's individual agenda items become predominant as opposed to the context. You have to arrive at the context before you start doing agenda or planning.
This has nothing to do with agenda or planning. I said nothing about agenda or planning. There wasn't a single thing that I said that related at all to agenda or planning. And the same with Fred. Fred is the one that brought up that we were getting a lot into agenda and planning.
I don't know whether we were getting, maybe we were, maybe we weren't, but we were getting into an intention for what kind of ideal community we'd like to create. And that's a beautiful thing, and those of you who have that paper, I've been thinking about it for 2 years in various groups and on my own, and it's a necessary thing for us as a community to be thinking about, because our supervisors are not doing strategic planning, so we have to instigate it. But that's not that's not the energy, as I understood it, that formed this group that Paul, was all excited about. He was excited about a different topic, and although I love this topic that you started presenting,
So my point again is that Paul's agenda and what the specifics of Paul wants to accomplish can easily be fit within our context. Okay? But if we make it about one thing, then there's so much baggage associated with that, politically and everything else, that you're going to fight battles for years.
What do you mean?
And it's
What are you talking
Because it's,
about?
yeah, I
the
don't know.
CAFO issue or whatever it is, okay? I'm just telling you. But if you go through the process that I'm trying to lead us through and arrive at a context that we all can agree upon, everything that we want to have happen can be served by that context.
Yeah, makes sense.
Ed, can you give us an example? Give us one context that we can.
No, you cannot.
What do you mean by context?
The feeling
You
level.
missed the meeting.
You missed the whole introduction. And if we're going to have meetings, we have to arrive on time, okay? That's part of the deal.
And
You can't have a meeting if your members aren't there. You can't have to rewind and try to go over it again, okay? And that's true for all of us. You just can't do it. We'll never get anywhere. And we got to have committed people and everything else. I mean, that's obvious. So,
This honor, if you can't make it at 12:30 due to your outstanding commitments, then possibly we could talk about entertaining a different time.
yeah,
But
Yeah.
but yeah, in general, it has to be.
it has to be.
Especially to put it in a nice way, you have so much substance to you.
Yeah, so
But
much.
it's a crime not to.
It's my career.
I know. I know.
It's just my career.
No, we're not blaming you for that.
No,
But we just
it's
have to
that-
create a
it's that we have to-
structure.
If you're going to be included, we have to meet at a time where you're.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it has to be on the weekend. Maybe it has to be in the evening. I mean, I don't know.
Or is 1 o'clock a better time?
Or 1 o'clock.
I should be able to make it by. Well, usually I get to Argiro at 1 o'clock.
Well,
But
So
like if I tried
your
harder,
question about why don't you give me an example of a context, you have to do the process to arrive at the context, okay? And I wish it was as easy as that, but it's not, because the context is an internal thing, okay? So the only way that we're going to get there is to do the process and to do it completely. It's the only way you're going to have the aha experience.
So Ed, I have a suggestion, even though I did arrive about 12 minutes late, and I apologize for that. But I am familiar somewhat with the CPR process, and I have great respect for it. I've seen how it can literally be like a miracle that on a quiet level supports you to get what you want we're so used to setting agenda items and thinking that agenda items are the way to accomplish things. But it is a new way of thinking. So I would like to suggest the possibility that if there's a video or something, a YouTube that you feel expresses the process well, that we could all commit to watching before the next meeting.
I can look for such a thing.
Because I saw a couple YouTube videos.
I think there's one out there that I know of. It's pretty secret knowledge, to be honest with you.
Pardon?
It's pretty secret.
Yeah, but I did
not
find.
not that it deserves to be secret. It's just not well known. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
It's very high level technology. It's very high level.
Subjectively speaking.
but I think it's worth consideration enough that we should not have to say, well, it's the CPR process sinks or swims just on one meeting.
Yeah.
Because I strongly am in support of this, but there's a whole educational process from what I have seen
Yeah.
to be able to fully appreciate it, and then from that place of appreciation
All right, let's do this
be
then.
committed
Let's
to
do
it.
this. This is much easier. Let's just do a CPR, a very quick CPR about our meetings. Not about what we do after the meetings or anything like that, but what are our intentions for our meetings? Let's just start with that. Okay? Anybody want to start?
Clarity.
Respect.
Yeah, we respect each other. That's beautiful.
not interrupting.
Is somebody writing these down?
Not interrupting.
Yeah, well, that wouldn't be necessarily part of, but that's fine.
And to say the respect in like an egalitarian mode of speaking. In other words, everybody's opinion is like Lisa, for instance, might have a softer way of expressing than you or you or you, but it doesn't mean that we roughshod over Lisa. Right?
Consensus on results? Does that make any sense?
What is this?
Consensus on results?
On results of the meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can do that.
Does that mean you don't want to vote?
No?
This can go a lot faster. We arrive on time,
Right.
that we all have meetings that we can all make, that we're all prepared for the meetings, that we have fun at the meetings, that we're all alert at the meetings.
This is very important to me, we need to all agree on a way to arrive at decisions, on a method of arriving at decisions. This is probably one of the most important things to me.
I think that's what he's talking about.
But I mean
Yeah.
specifically, I don't mean vague
that
things
too.
like respect each other. Or
Are you
maybe
talking
the
about, for instance,
process.
Well, no, the idea is
Our
that you set the
process.
context and then the results flow from the context.
Are you talking about? Are you talking about
Okay.
consensus versus voting, for instance?
Exactly.
Well, David already proposed consensus.
And
Yeah.
that was at the end. It's talking about the
no,
end.
he said he didn't mean that. He said
No, I said-
voting would be fine. I mean,
No, voting won't work.
I have a point of order here.
Yeah.
It seems to me in this discussion, everyone's opinion is equally valid. So David suggested something, and Einar suggested something. They may not have been the same,
Right.
but we shouldn't judge them right away. We should just
Right.
accept both of them and write them down.
Right.
Sort of like
Brainstorm.
brainstorming sessions.
Well, it's a way of respecting what everyone says.
Right.
What David said, he said the word consensus in a way that's not usually meant. It did not mean that we don't vote.
Right.
He meant something else.
Ultimately, is the consensus.
But more important to me, as Einar said, it's important to him that we agree on a way to decide things. And so he has the complete right to express that point of view, and we should write it down and not critique it, unless this is the time to critique what people say. And then, David has we should find out from David what he means about how the meeting should be run, when it's time to discuss that. But doesn't everyone have an equal right to be respected in this discussion here?
Well, no question about it. Everybody has that equal right. But if somebody suggests something and nobody agrees to it, then you obviously don't have consensus.
Well, wait a minute. Isn't that stage 2, Ed? Like we just get it all.
All right. Do we agree that we want to have consensus? Is that an intended result that we want?
I don't agree with that necessarily.
I would say it's not always.
I think let me just speak to that a little. All I've said is the word. Okay, let me just say my experience of what you've been saying about context is that context almost ipso facto implies consensus
It does.
in everything that we wind up doing at some level, at some higher level.
That's a good point.
May I ask
It does.
May I ask a question? We're using the word context. I have a very simplistic understanding of the word context, and I think it's being used here in a specific, kind of academic, there's a nuance of the definition of it, and it's a surprise to me. It's not wrong. It's just that, let me say this, that you may kind of more or less live in this newer, broader definition. And to me, it doesn't, when you say you have to be context, it isn't like, well...
What does that mean?
I feel the same way. I don't know what you're talking about.
That's because we haven't completed the process.
Right, and so we're not familiar with it, right?
That's right.
Okay.
So we're on intention.
I'm talking
right?
theoretically here.
We're on intention.
I remember the first time I was trained this by a master. Anyway, there was like 40 guys in the room, and this one guy from the East Coast was training on this. And we're working on the intended results, and we were into this for hours. And he kept trying to help us get the context for hours. And finally, I looked at him and I go, "Well, that's the context." And he goes, "Yeah, you got it." So I'm saying
It takes hours.
it's an aha experience, but I'm trying to give you a taste for it. Now, what you said is true, because we cannot respect each other if the voice of everyone isn't heard. Obviously, everyone's voice must be heard. In fact, we have a duty to speak the truth that we all hold. Okay? Because if you hold back, then you're not giving your best. So one of our intended results is that we give our best. Okay? We each give our best. We do not hold back. That we're honest with each other. That we don't come from our egos as much as we can avoid it. You know what I'm saying? That we stay in love with each other. That we stay united with each other.
Write some of these down.
Well, she's writing them down. That we have fun. Because the fun, one thing I learned after doing this hundreds of times, the number one missing intended result is not having fun. Because if you can have fun, then it brings lightness to the whole situation.
So I have a question, and this intention, I have to explain myself. This is changing the subject a little bit, not from what you want to do, but from the topic we were talking about.
I got about 1 minute. I got to go.
And some of us have been in men's teams, and there's this thing called processing. And I've heard, this is kind of going more deeply into people about why they think the way they think and why they feel the way they feel. And I don't feel at home with doing this in a co-educational setting myself. I would not participate in that. And so we're going to get into stuff if we stay together as a group. And so we have to have some idea of how much probing, we are going to do or not going to do.
I don't think we're going to do any.
Yeah.
Well, that's-
Why would
I'm
you?
not into probing, so,
You mean sort of on a personal level?
no.
Yes. Well, yeah. Yeah, right.
See,
Like
we,
so-and-so feels this way because why do you feel this
no,
way?
no,
You know,
no,
we've been
no,
through
no,
this.
that's not it, that's not it.
So I'm not saying we should do it, but I would just like to be clear about it.
We're not gonna do it.
Well, that's.
It's not part of what we're gonna do.
Okay, so that's not part of the CPR. is what
No,
you're saying?
not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
Yeah, I just meant not only this meeting and this CPR, but as a group, as ongoing.
No, this has nothing to do with self-analyzing or,
Well, that's something we all need to decide. You know, as a
Why,
group.
I don't see I don't get, how would it actually? How,
yeah,
why
why,
do you see?
why would we?
Let me give you an example. I think what I'm talking about, and this is going to come up sooner or later anyway. We all have our different styles of presentation, different forcefulnesses of personality. And so, Ed, when you have been bringing this up, you're not only teaching us something kind of new to many of us, but the way you speak is very, very forceful. You're used to it, all right? That creates in me, for instance, a slightly defensive thing. And already you're taking the high point, right? And then are we just saying, oh, no, we're not going to deal with emotional style issues? Oh, really?
Well, we're not gonna, no, it doesn't mean that you can't bring up the feelings that you're having. But we're not gonna go into some kind of psychiatric analysis of why you're having those feelings.
No, I'm not saying
That's
that.
all
It's just
I'm
that-
saying.
it's
We're
just
not
that
gonna go
that's
into a
part of
process.
creating the respect is addressing style issues. For instance, you and Haddington were speaking admirably about the same process,
Yeah,
but a
that's right.
completely different
That's
tone
right.
of voice.
That's exactly right.
Completely different tone of voice. And so you're talking about having fun. I can't have fun if I'm being defensive. But if I can be real to you and vice versa, then it becomes more fun in the long run. And so I'm just addressing this.
So maybe one of the one of the important contexts for the group and also for what we may accomplish in the community is that that we feel safe to bring up these kinds of issues, and if someone else feels challenged by our style of presentation, we're willing to hear it and then work through it, because we all have very separate and distinct and defined personalities.
Yeah, feel safe and be ourselves.
And trust me, there are some contexts in which I'm viewed as being too forceful and too opinionated. So I appreciate you having brought that up, Einar, because if we don't, to me, what you're saying sounds like a point of safety, to be completely honest, open, and intimate. So I appreciate you.
I wasn't taking sides in that.
Yeah, I know that. I know. Yeah.
And I do want to mention also that you used the word
Co-education.
co-educational.
In other words,
Um,
two genders.
Oh, that's right. At least
Two or more, yeah.
Two or more. Up to five, but no more than five. I gotta go. So,
Thank you,
Hey,
Ed.
thanks.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you
you.
very much.
And I'm
I'll try to
gonna.
chill out next time. How's that?
Hey, I'm
You're
gonna
a
look.
lawyer.
I'm gonna look for those. See if I can find one or two of
Yeah,
those.
shoot me something.
Speaking of
Okay.
co-educational,
We'll set
I
up
just
a new
mentioned
meeting.
this on his way out. I was thinking it would be great for a number of reasons to invite Margaret Dwyer to this group meeting next week. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I agree.
Unless she's willing to be part of this circle, I don't
Right.
think it's a good idea.
Right, but I mean, how would she know?
Well, the thing is, I'm in favor of inviting her, but then you have to tell her what the purpose of the group is.
Yeah.
And as far as I know,
we're
don't have
not
any
quite
clue
there yet. Right.
Yeah, I would think it might be better to wait until we're ready and then we engage her.
Unless
Because
we have a
she's,
separate meeting.
All
That's
right.
an idea.
Ed,
Thank you,
Thanks,
Ed.
Ed.
copies of that.
Yeah, I think a
Could you get
separate
some?
meeting.
You want the
maybe,
declaration?
because
Yeah.
I'll send it around.
I'm
Yeah, that was
interested
great.
in
Okay.
getting her sort of
Thanks, Ed.
semi-public view on her goals for
Well, the election is
supervisor.
November, right?
Yeah,
We've
so we've
got
got time.
And Clyde and I spent like an hour with her
I don't
at her
understand who
house,
she
Oh.
is.
and we interviewed her.
Running for super.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, and I'm happy
Oh,
to report on this.
Well, what was your, any
Yeah.
Oh, we're
One at a time, please.
Yeah, I was.
She's like the best thing since sliced bread.
Yeah,
Wow.
great.
Sliced bread.
Wonder bread.
I didn't hear. Back to the structure or content of our meeting. you're talking about the coeducational. One of the principles that's been part of several of the styles of meetings up to this time have been the balanced inclusion of genders, so that you get the basic left brain and right brain, or different styles of functioning of all humans, together to create a wholeness in one meeting. So what you're talking about is very important to finalize. And I think in these meetings, it's not about like in men's groups, we get down to core stuff which is not appropriate for a coeducational. But this is probably not going to bring up those or be addressing those.
I have a few points too. It seems to me that this process is more a feminine style of having a meeting and coming to conclusions, because it's
The
more-
CPR thing that...
it's more the Devata value. You're not concerned with the results so much. Later on you may be, but you're more concerned with the process, the feeling level. So that's one point I want to say. And also, where am I remembering this vibe
Kevin
control?
Innes. Kevin Innes.
What was the word? Vibe what?
Vibe protector.
Vibe protector.
Oh, it's a
So-
person.
Yeah, it's an actual person.
Isn't that something you have on your
And
cell
there's a
No, it's a person. It's a person like I brought up.
It's
Like I brought up. So
exactly.
wait a
It's
minute.
saying,
Here we're
what
getting
I
this feeling,
observe
blah,
is
blah.
here in the
That's
group,
exactly
da 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 da.
Yeah.
Okay,
And it
you could
seems
be-
like,
Oh, good.
that might be something that we would like to have
Yeah.
in the group.
Yeah, Bruce volunteered.
I would like to, I'm sorry, are you done yet? And continue, please.
Yeah, there is one other
Because I'm
thing.
going to support what you're saying
Thank
here.
you. Thank you, Fred, for all that you've said. I do get a little shy in groups sometimes. I was going, if you'd like, I was really quite inspired by an email I got. It's called the Declaration of Sovereign Intent, that was written and drafted and signed and filed, I guess, to the federal government in 2010 by 270 people from all over the country. And they spent several days conceive of this. And so you can listen to it online. It's an audio. You can also get the PDF, but you have to sign up somehow as a password or whatever. But I got inspired.
Keywords.
I don't have the password.
Declaration of Sovereign Intent.
I can send it to you all. I don't have.
Oh,
your,
yeah, that-
I don't
that-
think I have your email. Maybe I do.
Mine?
It's on the group thing, right?
Yes.
David.
Yeah.
What's your last name?
Balloon.
Right. Oh, David. Hi. Yes.
Hi.
Thank you. So anyway, that's it's a more of a federal level, but in the context of the Declaration of Independence that he read, I really like that. And the other thing is, when he's talking about the feeling level and what do we want to create, and I like to use the word create heaven on earth. And there are a couple of things that come to my mind. One is when I was 3 or 4 years old or so, I knew I was going to live in heaven on earth by the year 2000. And I moved to Vedic City in 1999, and I knew it was going to start in patches in the world, and it was going to spread. And there was going to be these golden centers in the world, and they're going to spread. And later on, and the feeling level was there. And then later on in high school, we would discuss what it would be like to be in a utopia. And again, that same feeling level is there, and I think that's what we're trying to get at here. A feeling level where everybody in the whole community is, in bliss and harmony. And of course, that takes some process. But it's just very simple. It's what Marshes talks about, basically: health, harmony, abundance, prosperity, peace. To me, these are the abstract context points that we're getting at.
Yeah.
Very simple. Unity, higher states of consciousness. And that may not mean too much to some people, but it's the unity within the diversity, basically. And then the third thing, or the next thing I'd like to say is, I was reading over my genealogy recently with my grandfather. He wrote a lot of books, and he was very prominent in public health in China as a medical doctor missionary. And there was one pamphlet, it's called The Health Show Comes to Town, and how they did it in China and had great success. What they would do when they got an invitation from a city, this could apply to us working together with others in the community. When they got an invitation to go to a city to give a seminar on public health and hygiene to the masses of the Chinese, and they weren't literate, they didn't know anything about hygiene, and they're creating a lot of disease from it. The first thing they did, now this is a little bit away from the dynamics of our meeting right now. The first thing they did was they sent them a manual of how to proceed to organize it, and they sent it to all the top leaders in the community. And so that meant in all areas of life, business, finance, government, education, health, and all that. And they sent it to each one. And then they asked them to take responsibility and work together to create this seminar, which might even be a few days long or whatever. And they had this common goal of health for the community. But they had never before worked together, all of these different leaders in the community, and they had a common goal now to work on. And it really brought them together, and they were leaders already, so they came together with a lot of great ideas. And and they had to take full responsibility for the marketing and the financing and the organizing and the setting up and the publicity and everything. And then there were certain steps after that, and I was reading this, I go, wow, we could use this in this community, this whole booklet that my grandfather wrote. And then that reminded me of what Maharishi used to say in the 70s. He'd say, think of what we want to create for heaven on earth, and then that's how we do it with our ritam, with our consciousness. We think of the goal, and then we let nature organize. And then he said, for example, and little stories of how to be. For example, a little boy comes to his father's office, and the father is a leader. And at 9 o'clock in the morning, they're talking about all the leaders of all the different areas: business, education, government, agriculture, defense, whatever. They're all thinking on this one thing: how to improve the health of the whole world, actually. And then at 10 o'clock, they talk about education. They're all thinking together. And 11 o'clock, they're thinking about agriculture, like that. And the little boy is seeing the collective thinking. But the point is here is that they have I think they have the context of unity and a general principle. They want health, or they want better agriculture, and then the results come together by the collective thinking. So that's about all I have to say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
May I say something?
Yeah.
We obviously have an ideal. We have ideals of changing the community
Right, of
in a
course.
pure way of
Right.
powerful synergy.
Right.
And it looks like this is not something we can just do in an hour and a half. And I want to suggest, as a move, that we watch this CPR video. We find one, watch it, right, and maybe come together for another meeting similar to this, but also, say in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something, have a whole Saturday afternoon, for instance, as a group to go through these things in detail. Because you just said some really good things, but you took a long time to do so. And Ed had a lot of stuff, and you have a lot of stuff. These are, if we're talking about a major new way of dealing in a community, it's going to take some time to even understand where we're coming from. So that's a motion.
I second it. Yeah, I don't think that an hour is going to
Right.
do anything very aggressively to get this thing coherent.
One thing that keeps occurring to me, and maybe it's me, but
This is a
you
point
just
of order.
interrupted me, Hank.
I know, but Fred was next. That was the point I was going to make.
I didn't know that.
I had said to her,
Oh, I forgot.
Yeah, so I apologize for the interruption.
Oh,
But
feelings.
thank you. Thank you for remembering. Well, that's-
Okay, Fred.
Well, first I wanted to appreciate Lisa's presence here. And I noticed the dramatic difference in feeling level between Ed's style and Lisa's style. And I'm going to channel Paul Cienfuegos for a moment, because he is so strong on equal number of men and women. And I know that one of the reasons is, I've heard him say this, that when differences of opinion in process or content come up, then the women are there to soften and give more chance for the thing to resolve in a friendly way. And I believe that.
Let's invite Hillary.
Hillary.
The lady who, we'll edit that out.
Partisan.
You mean Hillary, who does the weekly reader?
Yes.
So that's one thing. And I think there's a lot to it. But, we can't force anybody, to be here. I think if you have, Tom said something, I was talking to him the last couple of days, and said something like, well, groups usually form around a fire. So people got a fire inside about some particular purpose. And then if enough people have, really interested in that, then there's like some energy that has a chance to come together. So I just want to be really clear, because I'm going to write an email about this.
Don't do it.
How many pages do you email?
Well, I'm going to send around something very similar to what I passed out at our very first meeting Wednesday morning here, on the Wednesday that Paul spoke. Because my fire is around the following. We've had Paul Cienfuegos here twice. He talked about community rights. And the first time, Clyde and Jeff Shipley, at the very least, and one or two other Republicans or Libertarians came. And they loved what he said. And Clyde so much that Clyde invited him back and organized, 3 weeks ago. And then a bunch of you guys came who hadn't been at the first one. And what Paul noticed and brought it out is that, look at this, you guys. People from supposedly opposite ends of the political spectrum who normally would disagree, are in strong agreement about community rights and the principles and strategies that were presented. And, I've heard things from Clyde and from, I forget who else, Jeff Shipley and maybe Ed, saying, well, he didn't say anything that I disagreed with. So Paul got inspired and said, why don't you guys get together and see what you have in common and what differences might remain, and break this thing wide open, because our country has these divisions right now, which look real but I think are fake.
I agree.
The red and the
Yeah.
blue and the
Completely.
right, and they're meant to divide us.
That's a
Right.
huge
Absolutely.
point.
And so,
Wait, yeah, you said right, so it's a question. It's only partially false, and I consider myself an expert on this.
but can I finish what I was saying?
Yeah, but you just asked the question. You said right, and everyone said
Oh.
right.
You mentioned my name, so I get to talk.
I have to say it's only partially false. It's economically valid. Politically, partially
What,
valid.
the divisions?
Right and
Okay,
left are
so-
Yeah, let's
economically
not get
valid.
into that.
Okay, well, all right, you can totally say that, but I just want to finish what I was saying. Just mark it down, and you can say something about it. My point is, what I'm interested in, my fire is in working with the people who I might disagree with on possibly superficial political topics, and see what aspects of community rights or other
You have in common.
that we have in common explicitly, and really nail it down, and because we could be a model in how people who have differences can work together, and it's not going to happen by all of us agreeing to love each other. I mean, it's okay to do that, but the love, comes from experience and comes from working together and saying, oh, he respects how I feel, even though we don't agree. And this was Paul's point, and someone else at least, that we're going to disagree on some things, but Paul says if you are brave enough and trust each other enough to dig into those things, you might find that they're more superficial. Maybe not all of them, but some of them. Now, to me, that's hard work, but that's what interests me. I totally love the goal of creating a better Jefferson County, and I've been working at it for a couple years. And I would support it indirectly, but my fire is around anybody with differing political opinions who wants to look for what's in common. So
Good.
that's what I thought the purpose was. I'm done.
Okay, good. So let me say that, I have to go away.
I gotta go too.
Everybody's kind of got to go. You want to make a point, and then we'll make a closing type of statement?
There's two things. One is that for me to feel comfortable at meetings, I require a structure of who's going to speak next. That's just the way I am. We've been winging it, and I'm not comfortable with it. I might sort of tough it out, but I need that structure so that I feel there's this subtle competition of who's going to speak next. And it might be conscious, it might not be, but I feel I would like to request later on maybe some decision about whether we're going to have a coordinator. Kevin Innes, recommends a coordinator and a note taker and a vibe protector.
Yeah.
The coordinator would call on people, and that would be the coordinator's decision. Or we could decide, no, we're not going to do this, we're just going to keep winging it. Secondly, Lisa said love, and then that creates specifics, and Fred said specifics, it creates love. They're both true.
I don't think Fred said. Oh, Fred said this. Sorry, I was
Yeah,
talking
so,
about you.
these are the two eternal points of view, and I regard them as both true and valid.
What I appreciate about Einar is that he tries to include incredibly variant aspects into one reality, and I just really, really appreciate that.
Yeah, he's a very deep thinker.
Yeah, he is. He's wrong most of the time, but he's very
But it's also right.
Okay, so I guess the emails are going to be what video to watch and when we're going to meet
Huntington,
next.
you're going to send something around?
I'm going to work with Ed to decide on a video, and it will be my intent to have that completed by, would Sunday evening be soon enough? And